Hey everyone, my name is Russ Sorrells, and I am one of the team members at CapEx Sales. We are a sales agency located in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia, focused on selling automation and capital equipment, so automation, leak test equipment, et cetera. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But today, what we want to do is talk about, in light of everything that's going on with the coronavirus and the recent shutdown of companies like General Motors, Ford, BMW, Volkswagen, that is causing some disruptions in the manufacturing community. So one of the thoughts that we had was let's try to get some information out as it relates to shutting down equipment so that it's done in a thoughtful and intentional way. So we developed this short presentation. Our intention is to only have this to be 20 to 30 minutes so that you can just view it quickly and understand some of the concepts or ideas that you might apply if you are required to shut down all or a portion of your facility and your equipment. We're going to have a series of these webinars. The next one that we're going to have is on pressure decay leak testing, and then after that we'll have one on mass flow, and then there are going to be multiple, and I think the next one after that is writing an RFQ, or how to, some of the content that you should have in a request for quote. We're going to talk about some of the ideas of engineering, advancing your career, or being heard as an engineer in your facility to kind of elevate your rapport in your company and help you, move up the food chain if you are an engineer. So we want to help you. Our goal is to always be adding value. We can't see you in person, so that's why we are creating and putting forth this webinar series. So as I mentioned, let's see. Okay, that's how we advance it. All right. As I mentioned, we are a company that is located in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. We represent ATC Automation out of Cookeville, Tennessee. One of the things to highlight about ATC is 85% of their business is repeat business. That means that year over year, 85% of the business that we do is with repeat customers. That says a lot in the automation industry, so that's why we lead with that as part of the conversation. Cincinnati Test Systems is the largest leak test company in the world, and serving, we've got multiple locations, every continent except for Antarctica. And yeah, in Antarctica, we represent, or we sell and provide leak test and functional test solutions. Duquesne Plastic Joining, they are a global and diverse plastic joining company, meaning that they've got every technology known to man for putting plastic together. Symetric is a high-speed in-process test and data collection company out of Ottawa, Ontario. That's a part of the Cincinnati Test Systems group. And then Keller Technologies is right here in Fort Mill, South Carolina. They are a comprehensive industrial air filtration solution company. All right, moving forward to the content that you're really interested in, and of course, encourage you to ask any questions. There's some polling that we can do as well, but really, the intent is to provide you with meaningful information that can help you prepare for a shutdown. Now, back in 1994, when I got out of school, I started as a manufacturing engineer at Cummins Engine Company. We had several machines in our machining department where they were Kingsbury. So Kingsbury's, these massive dials, I think they had 20 stations, gang, drilling and reaming and milling that would come down, and just lots of coolant, lots of things going on those machines. And so when we would shut down for a week, it was a big deal. And part of some of the challenges that we had, of course, were related to coolant. We used a water-based coolant, so the bacteria would build up. It would stink. It would be totally raunchy when we would go back into the facility. So we were always battling that as part of the challenge when we would go away for, say, a July 4th shutdown, or that we would shut down during the Christmas timeframe. So shutting down a machining center is a big challenge. I joke here that looking back at my machining days, there were always some hopes that when we would shut it down and come back, that it would run better than it did when we shut it down. But the reality was that it never ran better, and the challenges only increased if we didn't shut the equipment down properly and take the necessary steps to ensure that when we came back, that the equipment came up smoothly, and we were able to do that efficiently. So some of the things, and I have contacted companies that do machining centers, so modern machines here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I called them up. I talked to their service manager about what they would recommend for machining companies. So this isn't me necessarily pulling this out of my butt, which my team members might say that I do from time to time. But in this case, I actually called companies and had discussions with each of them on these specific topics so that it was relevant and real for each of you. So controller battery packs, that was the number one thing that he recommended. Make sure that your batteries were backed up and that you changed out batteries as necessary. You also want to lubricate the ways. So what they recommended was that you cycle the machine to lubricate the ways. So turn the lubrication on and then move the heads of the machine back and forth so that you lubricate the X and Y on your machining centers, gibs, linear rails, anything like that. You want to make sure that they are lubricated so that when they come back, they're not dry as you try to cycle the machine. It's going to skid. You have the shuttering that goes on when the equipment is not properly lubricated, and that'll cause damage to the bearings, bearing surfaces, things such as that. You want to make sure that your coolant fluid is adequately cleaned off of the inside of your machine. That is, you can utilize water to do that, just to flush it down into the tanks, and then you're going to ideally drain the tank as well, because that coolant is where that bacteria can build up, and it gets pretty darn raunchy in the process. One of the other things to consider is your tombstones, work holding devices, the part fixturing. You want to clean all of that up, especially if it is susceptible to rust. You might want to put a light rust inhibitor on your tombstones to avoid them from accumulating rust through the humidity that might be in your facility. I know here in the South where we are, you get lots of humidity, lots of humidity that can build up in your facility and cause some rust issues. And then you want to disconnect the power as well in case there are any surges that come. Maybe there's a lightning storm, something freaky like that could cause problems. So no sense taking a chance of that happening. So disconnecting altogether is a suggestion as well. So mist collection also attached to the equipment. As I mentioned, Keller Technologies, this is their forte, is mist collection. So they said, turn off and lock out your equipment first and foremost, because these are the steps that you want to use. You want to remove and clean the coolant that has accumulated in the mist collection system. You'll want to check the fan side so that there's no liquid standing in the plenum, so that can have a tendency to settle down into that plenum and dry up, especially depending on how long you're going to be out. And obviously too, it can get kind of smelly. You want to make sure to empty the P-trap. If my kids were here, they'd get a chuckle out of that one. You want to empty the pump station back up in your mist collection system as well. You want to remove the filter elements and the demisters for cleaning. And you just can flush those out with a garden hose if you have that available at your facility. And then if the filter element is not cleanable, if possible, put it in a sealed bag. So is some suggestions that they have with regards to making sure that you have properly prepared your mist collection for a shutdown. So for assembly equipment, again, we're just going to kind of rapid fire through these, and we welcome questions below. Happy to answer any questions that come up that need clarification, or that just on equipment that we haven't touched on here. So as it relates to assembly equipment, again, this is a specialty for us here at CapEx Sales. We use ATC automation, and a lot of the companies we represent do build automated equipment, whether it's an automated leak tester or functional test systems with Cincinnati Test, or automated plastic assembly joining equipment through Duquesne. So you want to cover the stations. So if you're going to shut down for a while, you don't want dust to collect and accumulate on the equipment. You want to home the stations and the robots, so you don't want to stop those mid-cycle and then disconnect the power. Sometimes when you go to fire the equipment back up, they won't know, the equipment won't know where it is, and that will create a potential crash scenario or other issues that can occur when you don't have the equipment synced and in the home position when you restart it. You want to release or vent any air pressure. And when you do that, something that will be important is if you have a head that comes down on the equipment. So if you have a press, an air press as an example, if you release pressure, that tooling is going to come down. So you want to put a stopper, maybe a block of wood or something in that station that will prevent it from coming down and causing an issue. And then you want to purge all the parts and components from the station, and you want to make sure that you cover all of those parts up. So you probably have parts staged at the machine. So let's say you've got some seals that you're pressing into a casting to seal on a shaft. Well, you don't want those exposed to dust. They typically have grease in them, and that dust will accumulate on the grease and potentially cause a failure long-term for that component. So what you want to do is just cover that equipment up. You also then want to just go ahead and disconnect the power. But again, as part of this, as part of the assembly equipment, you want to back up your PLC, which we've got a whole separate section on in the next slide. So equipment with PLCs and robots, you want to back up your PLC program. You want to back up all of your machine parameters, so your HMI settings, everything that you've got that is a setting that could vary. So any variable settings, you want to make sure that you've got those well documented and saved. Change any batteries in your PLC. That's a common, again, a common thread of every piece of machining center, whether it's machining center or assembly, any CapEx equipment. You want to make sure that the battery is fresh before you shut down. Then you want to change batteries in the robot. You want to back up all of your robot programs as well. So as I mentioned here, very common theme: backup, 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 backup everything. And then you'll want to have probably multiple backups of your backup, meaning that if you put it on a thumb drive, you want to take that thumb drive and put it onto a server or some type of more global system in the cloud somewhere, so that if you lose that USB or something happens to it, it gets damaged, you've still got the backup available. Industrial wash systems. Thanks to Better Engineering for offering some feedback as it relates to this. Really not a whole lot to do with industrial wash systems. You want to empty the tanks. And if you have a mild steel system, you'll want to apply rust inhibitor to those. And the recommendation really was just WD-40 is a good lubricant to use, or rust inhibitor really, to use to help minimize rust on the equipment. So if you have a stainless steel machine, really all they're recommending is that you drain it. It's a great opportunity to take time to get the sludge that has a tendency to accumulate in wash systems. It's a good time to take that out as well. So let's see, central coolant systems. So you want to empty the fluids in water-based, in a water-based system. Again, I talked about that bacteria growth that can really, it turns orange. It is nasty, stinky. I'm sure you've smelled, if you're in a facility that does machining, you've smelled that in the past, and you don't want to have your whole facility. It's tough to get out of your facility once it's in there. Consider, emptying your oil-based systems as well. So just flushing out the entire system and starting fresh is a great way to ensure that when you come back, you've got everything as good as it can be for that startup process. So when you do, as you do get that out of your coolant system, you'll want to spray it down. You want to make sure you spray the system down, because the coolant can have a tendency to stick over time. I'm sure you've seen that as it evaporates. There is a sticky, tacky residue that can really cause problems when you go to fire things back up, especially for pumps and way surfaces. And anything that needs to slide as that accumulates, it can cause a problem. Your wet scrubber. So if you have a paint system in your facility, let's say your BMW, you've got a paint system, you likely have what is called a wet scrubber. So those wet scrubbers, you need to, again, do the lockout tagout procedure. You want to empty the water reservoir to avoid the bacteria growth and the hardening of the accumulated materials. That stuff does get hard as it dries over time. You'll want to remove and clean any of the caked materials. You want to have the cleaning, so you want to clean the fan, you want to check the impeller for potential deposits that need to be removed, and you want to apply a slight film of oil on the sheet metal to protect from corrosion. And then you want to take time to clean out your ductwork as well. So again, it's a matter of, if you are shutting down, take the opportunity to get the equipment back to its original condition to the best of your ability, and you want to make sure that you're backing up the programs along the way. So that's really the theme throughout all of these discussions with this equipment shutdown procedure. Air, electric, and water services. So shut off the air, electricity, and water supply to the equipment. That's the ideal scenario. I can tell you, many years ago when I was at Cummins Engine Company as a manufacturing engineer, I was responsible for these functional test machines. And in the functional test machines, we had a tank. And in the tank it was full of Viscor. Viscor is a diesel fuel simulator, has the same specific gravity. So, and it really stinks too. But anyway, so Viscor is in, I think we had 15 machines at the time. So 15 of these machines, we had a central system that we used for filtration, and we had these plunger systems on the tanks. Well, we were out of the facility one weekend, and one of the plungers that we had failed. It had a seal on it. It wasn't a Viton seal, and when you didn't use a Viton seal with Viscor, it would tend to blow up whatever rubber seal was in there and fail. So all of the central Viscor filled into that tank where the float had failed, and it flooded the entire facility. So I was not super popular in the facility for a number of weeks, as everyone had to spend lots of time cleaning up the Viscor out from underneath machines. I mean, it was an absolute mess. So it's important that when you do have those type of central systems or any type of water supply to your machine, that you go ahead and shut that off if it is not necessary to maintain the integrity of the equipment during the shutdown. So you want to empty the water circuits. You want to empty and power down your air compressor as well. No sense, if an airline blows and no one's there, your air compressor is just going to run. So there's no sense doing that or letting that happen. That's just going to unnecessarily wear out your air compressor and potentially cause it to overheat and fail. So you want to properly power down all equipment and switch off the main disconnect if at all possible. So the facility environment, if you want to make sure that if you do have a central system, there's going to be a different dynamic in the plant. People, we give off BTUs, we heat things up. If there's activity in the facility, it's going to be, cooler than normal if you're running your central system. You just want to make sure that you consider this. It doesn't take a whole lot of thought, but just make sure that you've got a stable environment for the equipment while you have the facility shut down. Again, if you don't, then you can have the humidity in the facility to rise, and then you could have unnecessary buildup of moisture and cause premature rusting. So some other considerations, if you have equipment that has a long startup period, make sure that you have a plan to come in or continuously run the equipment. So let's say you've got a smelter that you really can't shut down for whatever reason, or because it hardens and the startup takes days and days and days. You want to have that running, and maybe just have a person that is tending to that particular piece of equipment on a full-time basis, or you're having that tended by someone. So that is, obviously you'll consider that as part of your shutdown procedure. And then also, sometimes you want to come in, you want to make sure that if you're going to start on Monday, that you don't wait until Sunday night to start the equipment up. It's best to do that a day or two in advance to make sure that you've got everything ready to go, because you don't want to have a facility full of people and the equipment is not ready to operate. That's obviously very wasteful. Your operations folks are going to be very dissatisfied with you if you let that happen. So, the shutdown list for manufacturing equipment is meant to be just a guide, a starting point for you. It's not a be-all, end-all. It's just some things that we had talked about internally that we came up with that we thought might help you in your shutdown processes or the partial shutdown of equipment in your facility. So we've got some additional webinar topics that we're going to be presenting to our customers here in the Carolinas and Virginia. So the next for these Industry Connect webinars from CapEx are going to be the pressure decay leak testing. That's going to be on April 15th. Mass flow leak testing on April 29th. Creating or developing the ultimate RFQ. So the ideal request for quote for your suppliers. We're also going to talk about growing your influence as an engineer in your facility. So, a lot of times that's, we all want to grow. We all want to move up in our organization. So we've got a lot of experience over the last, 20 plus years working with engineers. So we can offer some guidance and feedback and have some, HR people help us with that conversation as well. So again, our goal is to be adding value to you, not just to show up when it's time to sell something. Right now, we've got a little bit of a down cycle. So this is the time where we pour into ourselves, and meaning that you pour into you as an engineer, you grow your skills. And then when you come back to your company, you're going to be more valuable than you were before this process, before this, coronavirus hit. So that's the mission here, is to how can you pour into you? How can you increase your skill? As I say all the time, the market that we work in and live in here in the United States only rewards value. So if we aren't adding value, if we aren't increasing our value, then the market will not reward us. So as employees, if we aren't continually increasing our value to our organizations, we can't expect our organizations to pay us more or to move us up in responsibilities in management positions or different positions in our facility. So that's one way to think about it. Is always be increasing your value, and in doing so, you'll get yourself in a better and better position throughout your organizations. Or you may get so valuable in that organization they can't pay you what you're worth, and then you have to explore other options. So again, I want to thank you for allowing us to take this time to share with you some of the lessons that we've learned. Mike Dorsey he covers the majority of South Carolina. Chris Mullins is in Eastern North Carolina, kind of the 77 and over Eastern North Carolina. Adam Hooper is Western North Carolina, that's 77 and over. Plus he has some select accounts there in upstate South Carolina. And last but definitely not least, we have special thanks to Vicki Meza. She makes all things possible for CapEx, and we would still be floundering helplessly had she not put all this together for us. So special thanks to her, and more than anything, grateful for our customers and the opportunity to serve you. And we look forward to continually adding value to you so that our work helps you be better at your work. Thanks so much. Have an amazing day.